大家好，我是 Jenny， 欢迎来到沉思者 J。 有一个女人，她23岁就只身前往南太平洋的小岛，她拿着笔记本和相机，走进陌生部落的村庄。她想问一个问题：人类的本性究竟是天生的，还是后天塑造的？她叫玛格丽特米德，她是人类学家，但她更像一个侦探，一个用田野研究破解人类谜题的侦探。他的答案震撼了整个世纪。他说，你以为理所当然的一切都不是理所当然的，性别角色不是天生的，攻击性不是男人的专利，温柔不是女人的命运，这一切都是文化教出来的。今天让我们一起走进玛格丽特米德的世界，走进那些椰子树和海浪的岛屿，走进那个颠覆了20世纪人类观的女人的故事。1901年，玛格丽特米德出生在美国宾夕法尼亚州的费城。她的家庭不普通，她的父亲是大学教授，研究统计学和社会学；她的母亲是社会学家，从事女性移民研究；她的外祖母是乡村教师，充满教育热情。这个家庭的餐桌不是普通的餐桌，那是一个思想的道场。每天晚餐，大家讨论的不是今天吃什么，而是今天观察到什么，思考到什么，感受到什么。小米德从小就被训练成一个观察者，外祖母要他记下自己的观察日记，记录弟弟妹妹的成长，记录邻居的行为模式。这个习惯后来成了他一生最强大的武器。他不是那种乖乖坐在课堂里的学生，他的童年大部分时间都在家里自学，跟着母亲做田野观察。母亲研究意大利移民社区，小米德就跟在旁边，看大人怎么访谈，怎么记录，怎么思考。但他也有困难的一面，他的体型娇小，个子不高，从小就比同龄孩子小1号。他常常要用更大的声音，更犟的意志，才能让人听见他。这个早年的磨练让他学会了一件事：个子小不重要，声音大才重要。而他的声音后来带到让整个世界都听见了。1920年代初，米德进入巴纳德学院就读，这是哥伦比亚大学的女子学院。他遇见了改变他一生的老师法兰兹·鲍亚斯。鲍亚斯是人类学界的巨人，他的核心观念叫做文化相对主义，意思是没有任何一种文化比另一种文化更高级，每种文化都有自己的逻辑和价值。要理解人类，就必须深入每种文化本身，不能用自己的文化去评判别人。这个观念像一颗种子落进了米德的心里，他决定，他要用自己的双脚去验证这个观念。他要去最远的地方，去看人类最真实的样子。1925年，23岁的玛格丽特米德独自搭船前往萨摩亚群岛，这是他的第一次田野研究。他的老师鲍亚斯给了他一个任务，去研究青春期。在美国，青春期被认为是一段必然痛苦的时期，荷尔蒙爆发、叛逆、情绪失控，这被认为是青少年的天性，是生物决定的。但鲍亚斯怀疑，这真的是天性吗？还是美国文化造成的？他派米德去找答案。米德到了萨摩亚，他学习萨摩亚语，他住进当地人的家庭，他跟年轻女孩们一起生活，他观察他们的日常，他们的恋爱，他们的家庭关系，他们面对人生的方式。他在岛上待了9个月，带着大量的笔记回到美国。1928年，他出版了一本书，书名叫做《萨摩亚人的成年》。这本书造成了轰动。米德说，萨摩亚的青少年没有那种剧烈的青春期痛苦，他们的成长过程相对平顺，性态度比较开放自然，家庭压力比较分散。青春期的剧烈冲突不是生物必然的，而是美国文化特有的产物。这个结论让美国人大吃一惊。原来我们以为理所当然的事情，不是理所当然的。这本书不只卖给大学教授看，它成了畅销书，普通人也在读它，讨论它，争论它。 这是人类学第一次真正走出象牙塔，走进大众的生活。米德没有停下来。1931年，她和第二任丈夫雷奥夫群奔前往新几内亚。这次她要研究性别，她要问的问题是：男女的性格差异是天生的吗？她研究了3个部落：阿拉佩什部落、蒙杜古马部落，还有德昌布利部落。结果让她目瞪口呆。阿拉佩什部落里，男人和女人都很温柔，都很合作，都很有养育天性。不管性别，每个人都像我们文化中所谓的温柔女性。蒙杜古马部落里，男人和女人都很攻击性，都很竞争，都很强硬。不管性别，每个人都像我们文化中所谓的强悍男性。德昌布利部落里更有趣了，女人主导经济，个性强悍务实，男人则花时间打扮，互相竞争外表，在乎别人怎么看自己。这和西方文化完全相反。1935年，米德出版了3个部落的性别与气质，他的结论震撼人心。他说，我们以为男性化和女性化是天生的差异，但事实上，这些特质都是文化塑造的，不是性别决定的，而是你成长的环境决定的。这个观点在当时太超前了，很多人无法接受，但这个观点在几十年后成了女性主义运动的重要理论基础，成了多元文化讨论的核心论据。米德的田野研究方法也很特别，他不是从外面观察，他是从里面生活。他学当地语言，他吃当地食物，他住在当地人的家里，他和孩子们一起玩，和妇女们一起工作。这种深度参与式观察后来成了人类学的标准方法。但米德的个人生活也同样精彩，他结了3次婚，离了3次婚。他的感情生活从来不是传统的。他和第一任丈夫路德·克雷斯曼结婚时，他就已经明确告诉对方，他的事业不会为任何人停下来，他要继续田野研究，他要继续探索世界。第二任丈夫雷奥弗群是他的研究伙伴，他们一起去新几内亚做研究，但2人的个性冲突，最终分开了。最重要的一段关系是他和英国人类学家葛雷格·贝特森，他们一起去巴厘岛研究文化与个性。这段研究合作发展成了爱情和婚姻，他们生了一个女儿，玛丽·凯撒琳·贝特森，后来也成了著名的学者。但米德的感情生活里还有一个重要的人，他的终身挚友鲁斯·班乃迪克特。班乃迪克特是他在哥伦比亚大学的前辈和老师，后来也成了最亲密的朋友。2人的关系深刻而持久，有人认为这段关系超越了普通的友谊。不管怎么说，米德从来不让社会的框架限制自己，他怎么研究文化对个人的束缚，他自己的生命就怎么去突破束缚。1940年代，2次世界大战爆发，米德没有躲在书斋里，他积极投入战时贡献，他把人类学的知识用来服务国家，他研究各国文化差异，帮助美国政府理解盟国和敌国的心理。他和同事写了一本书叫做《远处的文化》，分析日本文化和社会行为模式，帮助美国人理解为什么日本人的行为方式和西方人如此不同。他也研究美国文化本身，写了《美国人的角色》这本书，帮助美国人更了解自己的文化特质，理解为什么美国士兵和英国士兵的行为方式不同。这段时期，米德把人类学从纯粹的学术研究变成了解决真实问题的工具，他开创了应用人类学的新方向。战后，米德继续在美国自然历史博物馆工作，他在那里工作了几乎一辈子，同时他也在哥伦比亚大学教书。他的课堂永远是人满为患的，因为他讲课的方式不像学者，更像说故事的人。他会带着田野照片来上课，他会模仿萨摩亚人的动作，他会用当地语言说几个词，让学生感觉那些遥远的文化忽然近在眼前。1950年代以后，米德开始进入一个新的领域，他开始公开谈论当代社会问题。他谈核武的危险，他谈环境保护，他谈女性权利，他谈教育改革， 他谈代际冲突，他的声音出现在电视上，出现在报纸的专栏里，出现在国会的听证会上。他成了20世纪美国最知名的公共知识分子之一。有人批评他越来越不像学者，更像一个社会评论家，但米德不在乎。他说，知识如果不能服务人类，就没有意义。1960和70年代是米德思想影响力最高峰的时期，他的著作被翻译成几十种语言，他在全球各地演讲，他的观点影响了整整一代的社会改革者、女性主义者、反战运动者、环保运动者、多元文化教育的推动者。他关于文化可塑性的核心论点被后来的学者一次又一次地引用。他们说，如果文化是可以改变的，那么社会就是可以改革的。这给了所有想要改变世界的人一个最强的理论支撑。但米德的一生也不是没有争议。1983年，也就是他去世5年后，澳洲人类学家德瑞克·弗里曼出版了一本书，书名叫做《玛格丽特米德与萨摩亚》。他在书中强烈批评米德的萨摩亚研究。他说米德的研究方法有问题，他的萨摩亚语不够好，他在岛上的时间太短，他的萨摩亚线人可能对他说了不实的故事。弗里曼说，萨摩亚社会其实并不像米德描述的那么平静自由，暴力和冲突其实相当普遍。米德被萨摩亚少女愚弄了。这场论战在学术界引起了巨大的波澜，很多人支持弗里曼的批评，但也有更多的人类学家出来为米德辩护。他们说弗里曼的批评也有严重问题，他研究的是不同时代的萨摩亚，不能直接拿来推翻米德的研究。这场论战直到今天仍然没有完全定论，但有一件事是清楚的，不管萨摩亚研究的细节是否完全准确，米德提出的核心问题是对的，文化确实会塑造人类的行为。这个大方向，后来几十年的无数研究都在支持他。米德的田野研究方法也在后来的学者手中不断完善。今天的人类学家会在田野待更长的时间，会使用更严谨的语言训练，会有更严格的研究伦理规范。这些改进很多都是因为米德的经验教训而来的。1978年，玛格丽特米德在纽约去世，她76岁。她一生写了超过30本书，无数的论文和文章。她培养了几代人类学家，她启发了无数的社会改革者。她去世的时候，美国政府追授她总统自由勋章，这是美国平民最高的荣誉。美国前总统卡特在颁奖词里说，他扩展了我们对自身的理解，让我们看到人类行为的广度和可能性。今天，当我们谈到文化多元性，当我们说性别角色是社会建构的，当我们质疑那些被认为是天生的偏见和限制，很多时候，我们说的都是玛格丽特米德早在100年前就说过的话。她带着笔记本走进那些遥远的岛屿，她带回来的不只是资料，她带回来的是一个更宽广的世界观，一个让我们看见人类可能性的眼光。她说，永远不要怀疑一小群有思想有承诺的公民可以改变世界。事实上，那是唯一能改变世界的力量。玛格丽特米德，那个23岁就只身跨越太平洋的女人，那个用田野研究颠覆时代的人类学家，那个让我们看见自己文化局限的伟大思想家。她的一生告诉我们，去看看那些和你不一样的人，去理解那些和你不同的文化，你会发现，你以为理所当然的事情，从来都不是理所当然的，而那个发现，往往就是改变世界的起点。我们下次见咯。Hello everyone, I'm Jenny. Welcome to Thinker J. There was a woman. She was 23 years old when she sailed alone to a small island in the South Pacific. She brought a notebook and a camera. She walked into a village belonging to a tribe she had never met. She wanted to answer one question: human nature. Is it something we are born with? Or is it something that culture creates in us? Her name was Margaret Mead. She was an anthropologist. But she was also something like a detective. A detective who used fieldwork to crack open the mysteries of what it means to be human. Her answer shook an entire century. She said, "Everything you take for granted about human nature is not as natural as you think. Gender roles are not born into us. Aggression is not the exclusive property of men. Tenderness is not the destiny of women. All of these things are taught by culture. Today, let us walk together into the world of Margaret Mead, into those islands of coconut palms and ocean waves, into the story of the woman who overturned an entire century of thinking about what it means to be human." Margaret Mead was born in 1901 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Her family was anything but ordinary. Her father was a university professor who studied statistics and sociology. Her mother was a sociologist researching immigrant women. Her maternal grandmother was a village schoolteacher filled with passionate belief in education. The dinner table in that household was not an ordinary dinner table. It was a dojo of ideas. Every evening the family did not talk about what they had eaten. They talked about what they had observed that day, what they had thought about, what they had felt. From her earliest years, little Margaret was trained to be an observer. Her grandmother asked her to keep daily observation journals, to record the development of her younger siblings, to notice patterns in the behavior of neighbors. This habit would later become the most powerful weapon in her entire intellectual arsenal. She was not the kind of child who sat quietly in a classroom. She spent most of her childhood learning at home, following her mother into the field. Her mother was studying Italian immigrant communities, and little Margaret walked alongside her, watching how the adults conducted interviews, how they recorded what they saw, how they organized their thinking. But she also had her difficulties. She was physically small, not tall, always a size smaller than other children her age. She often had to use a louder voice, a stronger will, just to be heard. That early experience taught her something she never forgot. It does not matter how small you are. What matters is how loud and clear your voice becomes. And her voice eventually became loud enough for the whole world to hear. In the early 1920s, Mead enrolled at Barnard College. This was the women's college affiliated with Columbia University. And it was there that she met the teacher who would change her life forever, Franz Boas. Boas was a towering figure in the history of anthropology. His core idea was called cultural relativism. The idea that no culture is inherently superior to any other. That every culture has its own internal logic and its own system of values. That to understand humanity, you must immerse yourself deeply within each culture on its own terms. You cannot judge one culture through the lens of another. That idea landed in Mead like a seed finding fertile soil. She decided she would use her own feet to test this idea. She would go to the most distant places on Earth to see what human beings looked like in their most authentic forms. In 1925, 23-year-old Margaret Mead sailed alone to the Samoan Islands. This was her first fieldwork expedition. Her teacher Boas had given her a specific assignment: go and study adolescence. In America at that time, adolescence was understood as an inevitably painful and turbulent period. Hormones surging, rebellion, emotional chaos. These were considered the natural qualities of being a teenager, determined by biology. But Boas had a different suspicion. Was this really nature at work? Or was it the specific product of American culture? He sent Mead to find out. When Mead arrived in Samoa, she learned the Samoan language. She moved into local families. She lived alongside young women of the village. She observed their daily lives, their romantic relationships, their family structures, their ways of facing the challenges of growing up. She stayed on the island for 9 months. She returned to the United States with notebooks full of observations. In 1928, she published a book. It was called Coming of Age in Samoa. The book caused an immediate sensation. Mead argued that Samoan adolescents did not experience the kind of violent emotional turmoil that American teenagers went through. Their transition into adulthood was relatively smooth. Attitudes toward sexuality were more open and relaxed. Family responsibilities were distributed more broadly across the community. The dramatic conflicts of adolescence were not a biological inevitability. They were a product specifically created by American cultural arrangements. This conclusion stunned the American public. People began to realize things they had always assumed were natural were not natural at all. This book was not just read by university professors. It became a bestseller. Ordinary people were reading it, discussing it, arguing about it at dinner tables across the country. This was the moment anthropology first truly stepped out of the ivory tower and walked into the daily lives of ordinary people. Mead did not stop there. In 1931, she and her second husband Rio Fortune traveled to New Guinea. This time she was investigating gender. Her question was this: are the personality differences between men and women innate? She studied 3 separate tribal societies: the Arapesh people, the Mundagamur people, and the Chambili people. What she found left her astonished. Among the Arapesh, both men and women were gentle. Both were cooperative. Both had deeply nurturing personalities, regardless of biological sex. Every person in that society displayed what Western culture would call traditionally feminine qualities. Among the Mundagamur, both men and women were aggressive. Both were fiercely competitive. Both were tough and uncompromising, regardless of biological sex. Every person in that society displayed what Western culture would call traditionally masculine qualities. And among the Chambili, things became even more fascinating. Women dominated the economy. They were direct, decisive, and practical. Men spent their time attending to their appearance, competing with one another over how they looked, deeply concerned about how others perceived them. This was the precise opposite of everything Western culture assumed about men and women. In 1935, Mead published a book called Sex and Temperament in 3 Primitive Societies. Her conclusion was stunning. She wrote that what we assume to be masculine and feminine are not innate biological differences. These qualities are shaped by culture. They are not determined by the body you are born into. They are determined by the environment in which you grow up. This perspective was far ahead of its time. Many people could not accept it. But this very perspective became one of the most important theoretical foundations of the feminist movement decades later. It became a central argument in discussions of multiculturalism and social construction. Her fieldwork methods were also revolutionary in their own right. She did not observe from the outside. She lived from the inside. She learned the local language. She ate the local food. She moved into local households. She played with the children. She worked alongside the women. This deeply immersive style of participant observation later became the standard methodology for anthropological fieldwork around the world. But Mead's personal life was just as vivid and unconventional as her research. She was married 3 times and divorced 3 times. Her romantic life was never traditional. When she married her first husband Luther Cressman, she told him clearly from the beginning, her career would not stop for anyone. She would continue her fieldwork. She would continue exploring the world. Her second husband Rio Fortune was her research partner. They went to New Guinea together to conduct their studies. But their personalities clashed profoundly. And eventually they went their separate ways. The most significant partnership of her life was with the British anthropologist Gregory Bateson. They went together to Bali to study the relationship between culture and personality. That research partnership grew into love and eventually into marriage. They had 1 daughter together, Mary Catherine Bateson, who would herself become a celebrated scholar. And running through Mead's emotional life was another relationship of great importance. Her lifelong companion Ruth Benedict. Benedict was her senior colleague and mentor at Columbia University, and later became her most intimate friend. Their relationship was deep and enduring across many decades. Many have suggested that this bond went beyond ordinary friendship. Whatever the exact nature of each relationship, Mead never allowed the conventions of society to define the boundaries of her life. The same freedom she studied in other cultures, she claimed for herself. In the 1940s, World War II broke out. Mead did not retreat into her study. She actively applied her knowledge to serve the national effort. She studied cultural differences between nations, helping the American government understand the psychology of both allies and enemies. She collaborated with colleagues on a book called The Study of Culture at a Distance, analyzing Japanese culture and social behavior, helping Americans understand why Japanese people acted so differently from the Western model. She also turned her anthropological lens on American culture itself, writing a book called And Keep Your Powder Dry, helping Americans understand their own cultural characteristics, why American soldiers behaved differently from British soldiers in the field. During this period, Mead transformed anthropology from a purely academic pursuit into a practical tool for solving real problems. She pioneered what we now call applied anthropology. After the war, Mead continued her work at the American Museum of Natural History. She spent almost her entire career there, while also teaching at Columbia University. Her lectures were always overflowing with students. Because she taught not like a scholar but like a storyteller, she would bring field photographs to class. She would demonstrate gestures she had learned from Samoan people. She would speak a few words in a local language, and suddenly those distant cultures felt close enough to touch. From the 1950s onward, Mead began moving into new territory. She started speaking publicly about contemporary social issues. She spoke about the danger of nuclear weapons. She spoke about environmental protection. She spoke about the rights of women. She spoke about the need to reform education. She spoke about the tensions between generations. Her voice appeared on television, in newspaper columns, at congressional hearings. She became one of the most recognized public intellectuals in 20th century America. Some critics argued she was no longer behaving like a scholar, that she had become more of a social commentator than a scientist. But Mead was not troubled by this criticism. She said, "Knowledge that does not serve humanity has no meaning." The 1960s and 1970s were the period of her greatest influence. Her books were translated into dozens of languages. She lectured around the world. Her ideas shaped an entire generation of social reformers, feminists, anti-war activists, environmental advocates, pioneers of multicultural education. Her core argument about the plasticity of culture was cited again and again by scholars who came after her. They reasoned, if culture can be changed, then society can be reformed. This gave everyone who wanted to change the world one of the most powerful theoretical foundations they could ask for. But Mead's life was not without serious controversy. In 1983, 5 years after her death, an Australian anthropologist named Derek Freeman published a book called Margaret Mead and Samoa. He mounted a fierce challenge to her Samoan research. He argued that her methodology was flawed, that her Samoan was not fluent enough, that her time on the island was too brief, that her Samoan informants may have told her stories that were not accurate. Freeman claimed that Samoan society was not nearly as peaceful and sexually free as Mead had described, that violence and conflict were actually quite common, that Mead had been misled by her young Samoan informants. This controversy sent enormous waves through the academic world. Many scholars supported Freeman's criticism, but even more anthropologists came forward to defend Mead. They pointed out that Freeman's critique had serious problems of its own. He was studying a different era of Samoan society. He could not simply use his research to overturn hers. That debate has never been fully resolved. But one thing remains clear. Whatever the accuracy of particular details in the Samoan research, the core question Mead was asking was the right question. Culture does shape human behavior. That foundational insight has been supported by countless studies across the decades that followed. Her fieldwork methods were refined and improved by the generations of scholars who came after her. Today, anthropologists spend much longer periods in the field. They undergo more rigorous language training. They follow much stricter ethical protocols. Many of these improvements came directly from the lessons learned through Mead's experience. In 1978, Margaret Mead died in New York City. She was 76 years old. In her lifetime, she had written more than 30 books and an enormous body of articles and essays. She had trained generations of anthropologists. She had inspired countless social reformers across the world. At her death, the American government awarded her the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest civilian honor in the United States. President Jimmy Carter wrote in his tribute, "She expanded our understanding of ourselves, allowing us to see the extraordinary breadth and possibility of human behavior." Today, when we talk about cultural diversity, when we say that gender roles are socially constructed, when we question the biases and limitations that have been called natural or inevitable, very often, what we are saying is exactly what Margaret Mead was saying 100 years ago. She walked into those distant islands with a notebook, and what she brought back was not just data. What she brought back was a wider way of seeing the world, a vision that helped us recognize the full range of human possibility. She said, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has." Margaret Mead, the woman who crossed the Pacific alone at 23, the anthropologist who used fieldwork to upend an era of assumptions, the great thinker who helped us see beyond the limits of our own culture. Her life tells us, go and look at the people who are different from you. Go and understand the cultures that seem foreign to you. You will discover that what you always assumed was natural and inevitable was never natural or inevitable at all. And that discovery is so often the very beginning of changing the world. See you next time.